Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about some of the best campaigns in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires for veteran players. I'm doing this in response to what people asked me on my video for the best beginner campaigns to make a list for veteran players. Like if you've played a lot of Total War, maybe you took a pause, you want to get back in, you don't want an easy fight, you don't want an easy campaign, you want something to really sink your teeth into. And specifically in terms of difficulty. I do wish to state from the onset that I'm not just going to include the most difficult campaigns, because the most difficult campaigns would be things like Daniel, Ogres, Vampire Coast, and entirety of the Vampire Coast, and a few others as well. But that doesn't mean those campaigns are good. So just because Daniel is difficult does not mean his campaign is good. I understand that there's certainly gamers out there who just want difficulties for difficulty's sake, but I do not care about the obnoxious difficulty in a campaign. I want the challenge, to be sure, but I want that challenge to be done well. So the campaigns on this list are going to be tricky one way or another, but they're also going to be for good Legendary Lords, for good races, where you are going to enjoy yourself. For the most part. I'm sure not for everyone, but that's just how things are. And I'm going to start this video with an honorable mention. Not fully on the list for many good reasons, but really a campaign I would dare say that anyone that is good at Total War, anyone who's played a lot of Total War, really should play at least once. And that is Nukhari for Slaanesh. And why am I including this particular campaign as an honorable mention and not on the full list? Well, the reason it's on the list is because Nukhari has, honestly, a pretty brutal campaign early on. But you do have all the tools needed to succeed in that. See, all of Wolf-1 is going to declare war on you. That is an inevitability. You are going to have the golden trio of Tyrion, Alariel, and Alfarian coming up against you. And you're playing Slaanesh. Now, Slaanesh does have the capability of dealing with all of these foes, no problem. But you're playing a race that is made up of glass cannons. A lot of units are not good at dealing with the range mass. High Elven settlements are some of the most formidable defensive settlements in the entire game. And by the way, the results that I'm going to show in these auto resolves are from modded situation, and it's still going to cause me tons of casualties. You got to be very, very careful when you are playing this particular campaign, because it is very easy to lose a lot of your troops in every single battle. But when you do win it, if you succeed, if you do manage to pull on ahead of Wolf-1 and then vassalize all of Wolf-1, because you do have the ability of vassalizing factions through either regular diplomacy or domination, which does require cult followers, or through subjugation, which means you reduce a faction to its last element and then you can subjugate them. So you can actually gain a significant amount of power. Lots of fun in doing so. I certainly think the process of being able to subjugate all of Wolf-1 and making Tyrion, Alfarian, and Alariel your vassals is a really fun one. The reason I am not putting this campaign on the full list is Slaanesh has a lot of issues. The auto-resolve situation, even modded, is awful. The lack of casualty replenishment. And also on top of that, yes, the early game is really fun. It's interesting. First 20, maybe 30 turns is a very interesting experience. But after that, once you've vassalized all of Wolf-1, it's dull as hell because you've won the campaign. You've done it once. There's no reason to come back to this campaign ever again. Like, it's challenging for those first 20, 30 turns, extremely challenging, but after that it's a steamroll because you will have Alariel, Tyrion, and Alfarian as your vassals pulverizing everything in your path. It is an issue Warriors of Chaos have in their campaigns as well, and why I would not recommend it for veteran players. That, yeah, you might have some level of challenge. However, at least unlike the Warriors of Chaos, Nukhari does at least have a significant challenge in the early game, and you do need to actually play well. And you can easily lose this campaign if you screw up. Like, you lose this army, it's game over. You are not recovering, because that means that Wolf-1 is going to build up. You play this campaign on Legendary, it is an experience, suffice to say, in a lot of ways. Not necessarily the most fun experience in certain ways, but certainly an experience to go for. So yeah, highly recommend it to do it once if you're a veteran player. It can be a lot of fun, lots of things that you have to worry about, lots of things to concern yourself with, but just doesn't have that kind of staying power that other campaigns do have. Slash does need a rework. All of the demonic races need a rework. Only Nurgle has gotten one so far. Scene should have gotten one, but we all know how Shadows of Change ended up going. Now, getting on with the proper list, and number 5 is Vlad von Karstein, or Isabella von Karstein. Though, to be very clear on this, regardless of which Legendary Lord you pick for this particular campaign, Vlad is always going to be the faction leader. So it is Vlad's campaign, you just get different faction effects, and one of them gets to be the Legendary Lord, the other one gets to be the Legendary Hero. Fun fact, if you do start with Isabella, you're significantly more powerful because Vlad as a Legendary Hero allows you to focus on his significant combat ability, his skill line, his melee ability, his magic ability, and he also starts with both the Blood Drinker and the Karstein Ring, so he's going to recover after every single turn, even if you do lose him in battle. Now, before 5.0, putting this campaign on this list would have been a pretty big joke in quite a few ways. It's still a very interesting campaign even before 5.0, but 5.0 has significantly changed things around. While you do absolutely have a significant level of power between the hero capacity for a vampire, starting with a vampire, having Vlad and Isabella and their enormous power, as well as a weapon string for embedded vampire heroes, there's quite a few things that have changed with 5.0. So, the dwarves, which used to be a joke of a race that you could steamroll very easily, no longer are so. In fact, they're quite a major problem that you are going to have to do your best to avoid having to fight. You can vassalize Ungrim, just declare war on his initial enemy in Grand Peak, take Grand Peak, build a barracks, and repair it, make sure you repair it, and you can vassalize him through diplomacy. Also, maybe start the journey off with the non-aggression pact. You might also have to take Zufbar and sell it to him. Be thankful that Ungrim does start hating Zufbar, so relations between them aren't so great. But Ungrim is only part of the problem, and in some ways the least important issue that you're going to have to deal with, because yeah, you can vassalize him pretty easily. Especially because just don't make any kind of peace agreement with Tempelhof. Make sure you wipe them out. Be brutal against Tempelhof, because Ungrim hates you, but he also hates Tempelhof, so he'll actually appreciate the fact that you're beating the crap out of them. Don't vassalize them, don't subjugate them, don't do anything like that. The bigger problem, though, in this campaign is Elspeth von Draken. See, Elspeth is designed to hard counter you. She reduces your healing cap, she has death magic, which debuffs you in a major way, she has really strong gunpowder units in her campaign. You can vassalize in this campaign, but you can only do so through diplomacy. So you don't have the same subjugation and domination bullshit that Akari has. If you're vassalizing a faction, you're working for it. It's not an easy win. And you do have to wipe out Karl Franz, and given the rework of the Empire, he is a significantly bigger threat. Far more so than you might imagine, because while you can steamroll him in a lot of ways, he doesn't have any big opponents to deal with from the very start of his campaign. So you suddenly have a much bigger challenge when the Empire isn't a joke. See, the Empire being reworked isn't just a significant benefit for the Empire itself, it's actually a significant benefit for every campaign that's in the Empire, because it makes those campaigns far better. So be it Draika, Festus, Kazdrak, it's a much more interesting ride to play a campaign over here in Imperial territory. Even dealing with the minor factions is going to be a far greater challenge. I mean, you'll still be able to steamroll over them, no issue, but you're going to have a far bigger trouble on your hands to do so. It's very easy in a vampire campaign to actually end up building up armies that you can't afford, because yeah, Raise Dead is an incredibly powerful mechanic, especially on higher difficulties. But what I do like about this campaign is the sheer level of flexibility. While you can't take mountains, you can take Wasteland, interestingly enough, so you can just decide, okay, I'm going to wipe out Tempelhof, then I'm going to go for Grand Peak, beat the shit out of Skarsnik, vassalize Thorgrim, and then go over there for Zarnagrund. But now that plan has been complicated by, you guessed it, Elspeth. Well, she is unlikely to go directly to attack you. She does have her own issues. She is certainly a threat that you have to deal with, and she's not an easy threat to deal with. The more you leave her alone, the worse it's going to get in this particular situation. Imagine just leaving Karl Franz and Elspeth for 30 turns. They obliterate everything around them in those 30 turns, and then they show up with multiple stacks of gunpowder units and spells to hard counter you. Yeah, that can get messy very, very quickly. So it's a great campaign from that perspective. You are powerful, but you're surrounded by enemies, and this is going to be a running theme. Being powerful, but being surrounded by enemies makes for an interesting campaign experience because it does force you to make choices that you wouldn't have to do. If you're just powerful but have a very easy campaign path, looking at you, Gelt, then that's a joke of a campaign. But if you're powerful, but at the same time surrounded by enemies on all sides and having a complicated geographic situation, yeah, that does make things potentially very messy and means that you are at risk of losing your campaign, even with all the power that Vlad and Isabella do have at their disposal. So, great campaign. Has been a great campaign ever since it was introduced. And originally I think it was just Vlad in Warhammer 1, then they added Isabella separately, and then, they merged them in the same faction. A great decision by CA over there. Because you could play as one of them, but you couldn't start with both of them. So then they changed that, made the situation far, far better in their campaigns. Great experience, really fun to play, and Vampire Counts are one of those interesting factions. They've never really gotten a rework at any point. I mean, they did get some improvements with from the Vampire Coast DLC, but I would dare say, despite the fact that they never got the full, proper rework and only one paid DLC, Creative Assembly managed to keep them relevant throughout the existence of Total War Warhammer in general. From 1 to 2 to 3, they've always maintained the relevancy of the Vampire Counts. They've always been terrifying to deal with. And that's a great thing that makes this campaign in particular really enjoyable. I would dare say this campaign and Kemler are the only two enjoyable campaigns. Manfred is a joke. Gorst, yeah, he's powerful, but he's dull as shit. This campaign, really fun. Lots of variety, lots of enemies to potentially fight or not fight if you can avoid it. You really have to play the diplomatic game well in order to avoid it. Because if you end up fighting all your neighbors, it doesn't matter how powerful you are, it's going to screw you over. So, great potential over there. Number 4 is Alith Anar of the High Elves. While the High Elves certainly do need an improvement as a race, they certainly can create some very interesting campaigns. It was either going to be this or Emmerich, and to be honest with you, while I think Emmerich's campaign is very interesting, I do believe Alith Anar's campaign is far more so. You are an extremely powerful lord, and the range benefits that have come with 5.0 do certainly apply to him, so he's actually a lot more dangerous in battles. But that doesn't matter. Having one powerful army does not make a campaign a steamroll. It's the ability of a race to maintain a lot of armies that are effective that makes them powerful. Now, the High Elves can do that, but they obviously won't reach the same level that Alith Anar has with his own army. Though, to be fair, every army has stock stance, which allows you to ambush an enemy when attacking, even if your ambush success chance is lowered while doing so. And you also have the Underway, or the Shadow Realms. Basically, Alith Anar, as he has been described, he's a Skaven Legendary Lord for the High Elves. Really fun experience, and I once said, quite a bit ago, that this was the best campaign in Total War Warhammer 3. And it's still one of the best campaigns to play. It's a lot of fun. The reason it's so much fun is, yeah, High Elves are powerful, Alith Anar doubly so. But look at this situation. You've got your initial enemy is right next door to Be'lakor, and you can bet that once you take this coast territory, you're going to have to deal with invasions from Be'lakor. You can farm him from experience, but it does mean you're going to be required to devote resources for that. You've got Silostra to the south, and while she is generally a joke, again, it's more resources that you're going to have to deal with. You've got Taurax. Beastmen are a pretty big cakewalk, but you're either going to end up fighting Katep or the Sisters. I'd recommend picking a fight with the Sisters. They do kind of hate each other, so Katep and Sisters generally end up fighting each other. You may choose to not get involved in that, but still, you do have Astankia giving you a buffer against Marathi, though in many campaigns Marathi ends up beating Astankia, so that's a longer concern. But then you have Malekith, you have Hellebron. Actually, Hellebron is the mega threat of this campaign. This may seem amusing to some people who think Hellebron and Dark Elves are not that great. Let me just say this. Hellebron has an incredible starting province. Dark Elves have an incredible economic potential. When under the control of the AI and when they're not getting screwed over by their starting locations, looking at you, Malekith, Dark Elves start pumping out lots and lots of armies. And this is the thing about Hellebron. She takes this entire province with ease. She may end up fighting Valkia, but she actually smashes the hell out of Valkia, and then she turns her ire towards you. And you've got other things. She may genuinely beat you in a straight-up fight. Yeah, because she gets a lot of powerful melee units, she gets a lot of powerful range units. She just continuously spams Dark Shards with shields, and while you can beat them one-on-one, can you beat 2 stacks? Can you beat 3 stacks? And even if you defeat her, you still got Valkyrie, you still have Sigvald, you may even have a visit from Norska. So regardless of how you decide to play this campaign, regardless of which way you're expanding, you're going to meet more and more enemies. While the long-term potential of this campaign certainly suffers because of climate, I would dare say the changes to Norska climate has certainly benefited this campaign. But still, it can be a rough ride, especially when you're starting off. Like, you can have a lot of hours experience in Total War, but Alith Anar can surprise you in how easily things can go to hell in this particular campaign, and that's what I like about it. A really powerful campaign, lots of power, absolutely, undeniably so, though I'd probably recommend using the load save character system, as well as potentially restarting this campaign several times over until you get, good objectives over here. But still, lots of potential over here in this particular campaign. Lots of ways this can go very well, or it can go very poorly. So don't underestimate this campaign, because it might be the last thing you actually end up doing. Be very, very careful about this one. Also, I would recommend that you actually move that you ignore that starting army over there and move Alith Anar right next to the Black Forest, because you likely will have an objective against this army, and Silastra will attack this element. Leave Silastra take all the damage, and then wipe her out. Better plan, actually, because that's how you eliminate the threat. But it is certainly a campaign that does test you as a player, and that's why I'd recommend it. Lots of power again, lots of availability. I'd probably recommend playing an Emmer campaign, getting a bunch of lords, low level as possible, with Tamarkan's defeat rate, and then loading them up in this campaign can be glorious, can be really fun from that perspective. Number 3 is Emperor Karl Franz of the Empire. Despite the Imperial rework, which honestly made this campaign from being insufferable to actually being very enjoyable, Karl Franz does have a fairly rough campaign. You do start with a really good starting province, and the enemy that you're initially dealing with is fairly easy to deal with. You no longer have to besiege Helmgart, which I'm very grateful for Creative Assembly doing that. But look at this particular position. You may have a great province, but this particular province is vulnerable on a lot of sides. With the exception of Uberstrike, like Eilhart, Altdorf, and Grunberg can be easily attacked from multiple directions. And you have a lot of enemies. You've got Greenskins in the north that are very likely to declare war on you, and they're going to burn Midland to the ground. You've got Kazrak, who's at war with you, and he's going to attack Altdorf very quickly, though you cannot resolve him, but he's going to be coming back. Eilhart in particular is a threat. You have Festus to deal with, you have Vlad to deal with, you have Draika, and that's just in the Empire. Now, to be fair, Draika is a distant threat, she won't usually come against you, but the thing about this campaign, because of the mechanics, you're not just interested in your territory, you're interested in keeping the Empire together because of Imperial authority, but you're also interested in preserving the Elector Counts because you can confederate them with the Emperor's decree, specifically unify. So that does give you a ton of power, lots of possibilities, but it does mean you're playing a complicated chess game over here, trying to keep the Elector Counts or a reasonable number of them alive, so you can then confederate them, because it will give you tons of benefits in the long term. But there's more. You also have Kemmler, who has taken a liking to brutalizing Marienburg, and you do have Grom as well, and also Orion and potentially Durfu. Yes, it's not uncommon to, like in my campaigns, I've very rarely seen Durfu declaring war on the Empire. I know people meme about it, but I personally haven't seen it. What I've seen far more often, though, is Orion deciding he's going to suicide against Helmgart. So you've got a lot of legendary lords, each of which is very powerful in their own right. Yes, Wood Elves might be a joke under the control of the AI, but they're still freaking powerful if you're not careful about it. Oh, and to make it even worse, Ikaclaw does have a tendency to go for Bretonia and potentially invade you as well. So yeah, things can go very, very badly in this particular campaign very quickly. And also you got to consider the endgame crisis, because you do have quite a few potential endgame crises that can spawn and really mess up your campaign. Also, you have Norska to the north that might decide at one point to launch a full invasion. You might have Frot or Azazel burning Kislev to the ground, and guess who they're coming for next? You might have Azak potentially gaining a lot of power. Faction potential is going to play a huge role in this campaign, but regardless of which faction ends up being very powerful, you are going to have at least a couple of very powerful opponents to deal with here. And while you do have a lot of campaign strength, diplomatic strength, faction effect strength, your armies are pretty generic. I mean, you do get benefits for Electric Count State Troopers. You do probably have the best State Troopers of the Empire, of any Imperial faction, but you don't have, like, the super powerful Grape Shot ability that Elspeth can get very early on in her campaign. No, you just have regular humans to deal with Terror Trees, the Undead, the Greenskin Green Tide, and the freaking Hipster Elves, as well as the mutated Beastmen and the full might of Festus, who actually is more powerful with patch 5.0 as well, because he gets the new Plague mechanic, though I think his AI just doesn't use it properly. Let's be thankful that the AI of the Warriors of Chaos can't maintain more than 2 armies, or if even that, properly in their campaign, because if Festus could fully utilize the proper power of the Warriors of Chaos, yeah, you would have a very, very rough time. I mean, it's still a fairly rough time. There's a lot of ways to make this campaign work. There's a lot of possibilities, and you can make a war very effectively, but damn, it is an experience of a campaign. I mean, personally, I like Gelt a lot more, but I'm not gonna lie, Gelt is a cakewalk of a campaign. Karl Franz is not a cakewalk. He has a hard campaign. Arguably the hardest Imperial campaign in a lot of ways. That's still true. I mean, Marcus Wolfhard has annoyances, Volkmar has to deal with Manfred, but compared to the difficulty that Karl Franz starts with, yeah, those campaigns are a vacation. So that's what makes this campaign great, and Creative Assembly still recommends this as a beginner campaign. Yeah, don't play this if you're not a veteran of Total War. It is a very rough time, suffice to say. You do now have all the tools needed to succeed in that, whereas previously it was a miserable experience that you had to cheese. Cheese Imperial Authority because it was a fairly miserable situation. You have the tools to succeed, but can you? That's the question. It can go either very well or very poorly, or more likely some combination of both. So yeah, great campaign, great design, great Legendary Lord, and you really feel like the Emperor of the Empire trying to keep the bickering Electric Counts together and trying to be a master of both diplomacy and warfare against everyone that's trying to burn the Empire to the ground. And number 2 is Drazhoath, the Ashen of the Chaos Dwarves. I remember when Shadows of Change was coming out and people were of the perspective, oh, Chaos Dwarves are OP, they're gonna have an easy campaign situation. Hint, they don't. They've had difficult campaigns from the moment they came out in Immortal Empires. The reason why that's the case? Well, there's one particular answer. Grimgor. Now, of course, it's gonna depend on faction potential, so Grimgor could draw the short end of the stick over here and actually, well, not defeat it. I rarely see him defeat it. He is that powerful that even if he draws the short end of the stick of faction potential, he very, very rarely loses. Like, it's 1 in 1,000 campaigns where he gets wiped out at any reasonable time. Like, in the very long term, with hundreds of turns, sure. Within the first 50 turns, yeah, that's not gonna happen. And 900 campaigns out of 1,000, 191 campaigns out of 1,000, it's not going to happen. And the thing is, they actually make the more powerful of 5.0 because Tamarkan is likely going to end up at war with him, or more likely Grimgor is going to declare war on Tamarkan. And if you think Grimgor is horrible enough to deal with, imagine Grimgor with Tamarkan's defeat rate, which gives him hero capacity and global recruitment duration. Imagine him getting multiple lords with that particular defeat rate and just spamming you with heroes and a lot of units that you can recruit very quickly. Do note that on higher difficulties in this game, I'm obviously making this list based on Legendary, for whatever reason, AI stats modifier bugs out sometimes when you start a campaign, don't know why. But on Legendary, the AI gets plenty of recruitment benefits. Imagine adding on top of that. The AI already gets plenty of free heroes. Add on to that. And Grimgor has the ability of recruiting Black Orc big bosses from every settlement from the start of his campaign. So you better pray he doesn't end up wiping Tamarkan. Now, the difference for Drazhoath compared to Astrogoth and Zaytan, who do still have to deal with the big green brute, is that Astrogoth and Zaytan could reasonably defeat Grimgor in the early game, like within 10 turns or just as he's declaring his first Wa. So what makes Greenskin so dangerous is that Wa mechanic, significant faction benefits, an extra army following every army around, all that. But the thing about Astrogoth and Zaytan is they can conceivably defeat Grimgor before he's become a mega threat. It's still pretty brutal. It may be the hardest battle in your entire campaign, but you can do it. The issue for Drazhoath, he's too far away to be able to do it, and he's got other problems. If you think it's just Grimgor that's in this campaign, no. The dwarves have gotten mega buffed, so unless Skarsnik, and he can still do it, like, unless Skarsnik puts an end to Forgrim, you may end up having to fight Forgrim and Nungrim at the same time. And while Chaos Dwarves are a very, very powerful race, let me just say, dealing with the Slayer Tide and Forgrim's Doom stacks is not an easy experience. But that's more of a midterm threat. Your initial threats are Imric and Tretch. Tretch is a joke of a Legendary Lord. He's more of a frustration than anything else in a campaign, but he's still a threat that you have to deal with. Imric, if you let him build up enough, he can become nigh on unstoppable because he gets a lot of fire resistance to his army. Like, if Imric mounts his dragon, it might as well be GG in a lot of cases. You can still prevail. Sure, Chaos Dwarves are still strong enough to do so, but it sure as hell makes your life a lot more difficult. Oh, and then we're not done. We also have Helm and Gorse. Now, he hates Nurgle. Nurgle's been buffed, so you kind of do get a buffer because of Kugath. But let's just say Gorst hates you. And you can make it work by selling Pig Barter to him, but then you piss off both Kugath and Greasus, and while Greasus is a joke, and Kugath can be a joke, pissing both of them off is a surefire way of getting even more enemies. And you still have Grimgor to deal with, gentlemen. Actually, it can be even worse in this campaign, because if Malachi gets a lot of faction potential, he may just decide to pay a visit to Astrogoth. Yeah, that can be a fun experience, and let me just say this bluntly, Astrogoth doesn't stand a chance. Oh, AI Astrogoth. Actually, I would not want to deal with Malachi if I was playing an Astrogoth campaign. I think that would be a nightmare scenario, honestly. Because, like every campaign, like, with the exception of, like, Archeon and to some extent Alice Darkblade, well, not to just some extent, but like of the campaigns that start near Malachi, yeah, let's just say Fraught can deal with him, but him's having a summonable endgame unit in battle, even if it is limited duration, it is a pretty big bloody nightmare, and God help you if he gets Trollhammer torpedoes in his campaigns, because those will genuinely delete a significant chunk of your army. So it is a challenging campaign. You are surrounded on all sides. Everyone hates the Chaos Dwarves. Everyone. Even the Skaven. You know you're a bastard of a faction when even the Skaven detest you. That is pretty damn telling. And Skaven do actually get along well with a lot of hateful factions, but they don't get along well with Chaos Dwarves. Probably because Chaos Dwarves have a shoot-on-sight policy with Skaven, and because they're Chaos Dwarves and are make the Skaven look nice in some ways. No, they don't. Skaven are the biggest bastards in the lore, by far. But still, like, the way the Chaos Dwarves treat other races, yeah, it's unpleasant, to say the least. And that does have repercussions. You can get along well with the Ogres, kinda. They still hate you, so enjoy dealing with that situation. And if you make alliance with Greasus, you're just pissing off Grimgor more. Do you want to piss off Grimgor even more? He's gonna come after you. He certainly will come after you. And you just have to hope that you can get to turn 30, because the way the WoW mechanic works, it's usually around turn 10 that the AI factions of the Greenskins fill up that WoW meter and declare their first WoW. That lasts 20 turns. So if you can survive the first 30 turns of this campaign, you can have a quote-unquote easier time with Grimgor, quote-unquote, because he's still freaking Grimgor. So yeah, lots of things that can go wrong. You do have a nuclear weapon over here in the Black Fortress. It's no Eka Claw nuke, but it's still pretty strong with the prototype Mega Mortar. But yeah, lots of things can go very, very wrong very quickly in this campaign. So you just gotta be careful. Your quest battle is also pretty brutal as well. I mean, actually all the Castor quest battles are pretty brutal. So you have to enjoy dealing with that. Actually, in your quest battle, you're basically dealing with Nagash, more or less, because you're dealing with Vampire Counts and Tomb Kings. Yeah, it's basically like they've been hinting Nagash in so many freaking ways. Like the Silver Pinnacle situation, the Silver Pinnacle Grudge, Drazhoath's quest battle. It's like, if Nagash doesn't come out as a Legendary Lord, I'll be very shocked. Well, maybe things have really blown up in Creative Assembly. But that's a different discussion. Great campaign, highly recommended, can be a load of fun. And Chaos Dwarves, and it's worth mentioning this about Chaos Dwarves are a really powerful race, but you have to earn that power because you have to build up the economy, and because of the way that Drazhoath's province starts off with, yeah, the Sentinels are a very vulnerable settlement. A powerful settlement, they have a landmark, they have marble, but yeah, there's risk over here that you have to be aware of. And finally, at number 1 is Malachi Makaisen of the Dwarves. Now you might ask, wait, aren't the Dwarves a really powerful race in their campaigns right now? Yes. Isn't Malachi the most powerful legendary lord of the Dwarves? Yes. So how the hell is this campaign at the top of the list? Because for all the power that the Dwarves do have, oh man, this campaign is something else. It's not Epidemius level where you may end up having to fight Malice Darkblade, then you kind of get forced to fight it, but to be honest, you can manage that. Just having a powerful early game opponent is not really a challenging campaign, it just means you have a challenging start. Potentially, and Epidemius can avoid that, by the way. Malachi's campaign, though, is an experience. See, in every Dwarven campaign, you have several things to worry about that no other race has to worry about, because you're not just worrying about your territorial control, you're also having to worry about the Age of Reckoning. Now, I do think this needs to be changed, fixed in certain ways, because it is abusable and it is broken in certain ways, but I do hope CA doesn't trivialize it. Looking at the list of proposed changes, I'm concerned about that. But still, you've got territorial control, you've got the Age of Reckoning situation, and the thing about Dwarves, to understand, you may have really powerful individual armies, especially Malachi, but your units, your economy can't quite keep up with a large number of armies, at least early on. You can build up towards it, control a good portion of the world, and maintain a lot of armies, especially once you get all the other legendary lords of the Dwarves, which you can guarantee for the Great Book of Grudges and confederating them through it. But this just adds on top of that, because when you're playing a Dwarven campaign, you're not just worried about your own skin, you're also worried about how those dwarves are doing, because obviously you're interested in confederating with them when they're strong and have a lot of territory, because that is going to make you more powerful. So territorial control, grudges, building up the grudge meter to fill an Age of Reckoning, worrying about confederation, worrying about the fate of the other dwarves. And one of the things I've noticed, and I could be wrong on this, but it's something other people have mentioned as well, one of the things I've noticed is that the AI does seem to do better in the late game, and what I've seen personally is that, you know, if I'm playing a dwarf campaign, other dwarves are not going to do quite as well, in a sense. Like, let's say I'm not playing a dwarf campaign, they can do better. So, yeah, Ungrim can be a major threat for the likes of Azag, Rimgor, or Vlad. But if I'm playing a dwarf campaign, maybe they get wiped up. Maybe you get lucky and they do very well, but maybe you don't. And you end up dealing with not just the threat of Grimgor, but also the threat of Azag, which is pretty rare in a lot of cases, but it can happen. And then on top of that, you have Malachi's unique mechanic, which is the adventures over here. So you are also in an objective-based campaign where you have these objectives. Lots of power, undeniably so, but it is something to concern yourself about. And then, on top of all of that, you have one of the most difficult starting positions of any campaign in the game. You see, this is the thing about someone like Alith Anar. He is powerful, but he's in a rough position. Malachi is in an even rougher position than Alith Anar. And while he certainly is powerful, far more powerful than Alith Anar, he has a lot of things on his plate. You have the unholy trio of Azazel, Frat, and a Trog to deal with. You certainly can pulverize every single one of them, but can you deal with all of them at the same time? You can, but it's tricky. That's just the start. Because dealing with Trog means Wolfric suddenly has all of Norska at his fingertips, and he's going to come for you. And dealing with him is its own annoyance. Oh, you move north to deal with Trog and take his province. Great, you just encountered Malice Darkblade and Epidemius. And also you have Archeon, who's going to wipe out Boris Ursus in the vast majority of campaigns, and he's going to come for you, because of course he is. He hates you. You've got Astragoth coming in from the southeast. You've got Isaac potentially coming in from the south. Maybe. Usually he won't do that, and Catherine will certainly slow him down if he tries to, or even stop him completely, but things can go really badly in this particular campaign very, very quickly. Oh, and if you think, oh, I eliminate Malice Darkblade, what's the problem? Yeah, he's powerful in battle. I have Grape Shot Cannons and Thunder Barges. What could possibly go wrong with that? Well, congrats, you just eliminated Malice Darkblade. The territory he has is useless, so you have to give it to someone else. And you can give it to Boris Ursus, though if you're hoping Boris Ursus will help you out against what's to come, you would be wrong. See, if you eliminate Malice Darkblade, the outcome of that, you just made Sigvald significantly more powerful. Because without Malice Darkblade, there is absolutely no one that's going to stop Sigvald from taking all of this territory in the campaign map. And then he's going to attack the faction that he hates, you. And you might get lucky and Hellebron fights Sigvald, but yeah, relying on that kind of randomization. Oh, and we do have our usual, our usual nuisance in the form of Be'lakor to also deal with. So yeah, things can get pretty nasty in this campaign. Oh, also potentially Festus as well may show up, though I wouldn't worry too much about Be'lakor and Festus. It says a lot about a campaign when the least of your warriors are fucking Be'lakor and Festus, two insanely powerful Legendary Lords that could genuinely be considered two of the most powerful in the entire game. Archaon is, like, even when Archaon is not the biggest threat, and it's like you're concerned about this mega empire under Sigvald, yeah, that says a lot about your campaign situation. It is very, very easy to overexpose yourself to end up getting blown up, and you do have every incentive to go out there. Not because of the Age of Reckoning necessarily, but because of your adventures and trying to keep the other dwarves alive. So regardless of how you play this campaign, you're going to face some mega threats in this. You're going to have territory that's very exposed. In fact, when I'm playing Kislev campaigns, even before 5.0, one of the things I would do is I would never want to take Kraka-Drak as my territory, because even if it's suitable, it's insanely hard to defend. You start in Kraka-Drak, and abandoning it obviously is not necessarily the best option. I mean, I guess you could play a migration campaign if you just want to have an easy time, sure. Abandon your capital, go for some greener pastures. There's not necessarily that greener pastures available in this campaign. And that's kind of the thing about Malachi. It is an incredible campaign because there is that element of challenge. There is that risk. There are those enemies to deal with. And this is why I think Malachi is genuinely the best campaign in the game, especially for veteran players. Play this campaign on Legendary and enjoy an experience unlike any other campaign in the game. Because you are powerful. It is a good race. A lot of potential, a lot of possibilities with that race. Great heroes, great lords, great units. But all the factions around you to the north, west, and east are going to try and obliterate you, with the exception of the bear lover over here, who's not really that great at stopping the one threat that might consuming, and that's of course Archaon. And you are probably going to have to devote significant resources to try and keep him alive, because it's going to benefit you in the long term, or just to keep him alive so he is a bit of a buffer against Archaon. But yeah, it's going to be a rough time in this campaign. I've played this campaign quite a lot of times already, and I can tell you every single time that I've played it, something has gone to hell. That's the experience you can get with Malachi Mackayson. Like other campaigns, you may have a hard time at some points, but there's that randomization factor. With Malachi, it's always going to be a fairly brutal experience, and I love it. Costin here, signing out. If you do enjoy my channel, consider supporting me via PayPal and Patreon. Could certainly use the help at the moment. Things are pretty rough out there in the real world, right? Not just in Warhammer. Stay tuned for more.